I've stopped using Facebook remarketing campaigns across all my ad accounts, and honestly, I'm loving it. Performance is great, campaigns are more stable, and it just saves me a whole bunch of time as a Facebook media buyer. But why did I decide to turn them off, and what am I doing instead? Well, first, let's look at how I used to set up my Facebook ad campaigns. And to be honest, how most people still set up their ad campaigns. So I would have 4 main campaigns, and then within those campaigns, there would be further audience segmentation at the ad set level. Now, the system I use is where I would divide the stages of the buyer funnel into levels. But most people will talk about top of funnel, middle of funnel, and bottom of funnel. So I'm going to do the same for this exercise just so you can understand it better. Top of funnel would be your cold audience campaigns. So you would have one campaign which was for cold audiences or prospecting, if you want to call them them. And then within that, you will have different ad sets, which traditionally would have been looking at your interests, your lookalikes, and your broad audiences as well. But if you've watched any of my previous videos, you'll know that for the last year and a half or so, I've just been doing broad audiences, and any interest targeting I've been doing is just been because the client has been demanding we do it, because they've not moved over to the realization that post iOS 14, broad is the way to go, okay? So generally I will go broad, but traditionally that's how you have those campaigns. And you'd have your interests, your broad or your lookalikes, with exclusions for all the remarketing audience in every single one, okay? So every ad set in that prospecting top of funnel campaign would have your video views, your website visitors, your view content, your Facebook and Instagram engagement, and your purchasers and your add to carts as exclusions, so that we're just focusing on people who have never ever interacted with the business, because you're then going to capture them in the next campaign. So the middle of funnel campaign, this is where you would have all your warm audiences. And then within that, you'll have multiple ad sets depending on the level of segmentation you want for your audiences. So you might have an ad set that was your Facebook and Instagram engagers. You might have one that is your website visitors and maybe view content. Another that was your video view audience, so on and so forth, okay? And each one of those is gonna have the appropriate exclusions. So if we're doing a video views audience, we're gonna have to exclude the website visitors because we don't want them to be brought into it, or you have audience overlap between the other ad sets in that campaign. So you'll all have your unique individual exclusions, but they'll all have in common the fact that they'll have an add to cart exclusion and they'll have the purchasers exclusion, okay? So really this is where you're targeting audiences and just excluding what you need to exclude. And then the final campaign, your bottom of funnel campaign, that's really where we'll be targeting really, really hot people that are just on the edge of purchasing. So your add to carts and you might even have leads in there for certain clients too, okay? And then the only exclusions in those are purchasers because they're right down at the bottom of the funnel. And then some counts we would have that additional fourth campaign, which is remarketing to your customers, because they're a very, very high intent audience. They've purchased from you before. Not every client would do that though, because they want to capture those people with their free marketing channels, such as email and SMS. But some did, and you'd also often get very, very high purchase numbers, high ROAS on that campaign. So you want to separate it out so that you can see that it's coming from there, and you can accurately manage your middle of funnel and bottom of funnel campaigns. So that's what I used to do, and it worked very well with big accounts. It gave you a lot of control as a media buyer. You could go into specific audiences that were doing well, scale them up. Other audiences that weren't doing so well, you could pinpoint, okay, let's try different creative, let's try different messaging to speak to those people in that specific part of the funnel and try and improve things. So why did I decide to change? Well, it just wasn't working anymore as well, and I'm going to cover a couple of reasons as to why. So the first reason, the biggest one, ever since the introduction of iOS 14 and Apple prompting users to opt in or opt out of advertisers tracking their behavior across websites and apps, your remarketing audience sizes have just been much smaller because Facebook isn't getting that third-party data being fed back to it. And if you know anything about Facebook ads, Facebook needs big audiences with a lot of data points to be able to optimize and find the right people to purchase for your business. So if they have small audiences, it's just not going to work. Then kind of connected to that, just as a pivot when iOS 14 was introduced and the effects that had, I generally started to consolidate my middle of the funnel audiences anyway, because the audience sizes were smaller, which meant they weren't getting enough spend or frequency was really high. So just as a natural reaction to that, I was lumping them in together and consolidating that level. So if you like, this is just a natural progression where we've gone from a lot of segmentation to more broad, and the natural next step is to just simplify the whole account and bring everything together. And then the third reason, which was really the nail in the coffin, was I was starting to see that more than one account, performance on remarketing was worse than prospecting. So that top of the funnel campaign was doing better than your middle of funnel, bottom of funnel campaigns. And when you think about how people get to that middle of funnel, bottom of funnel, you've already paid for them in the prospecting campaign, and then you're paying to show them ads again in your remarketing campaigns, okay? So if they're not getting as good results in their remarketing, it's almost even worse than it actually appears because you've already spent money on them in the prospecting campaign. So that was really the point where it's like, well, this has to turn off anyway because it's not hitting KPI and the prospecting is doing better. Rather than just have it turned off and you're wasting all that traffic that goes into that pot, I'm obviously then going to just go, let's bring the prospecting and remarketing together so that the golden nuggets, the people that are good in that remarketing stage of the funnel, the middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel, at least we still get to capture them in Facebook's efforts to go out and find new people because they probably are the good within a bad audience, okay? So that was really the third thing that happened. And then I decided to switch to putting everything together. After it started working in one account, tried it in another one and saw the same sort of uplift in performance. So I have now rolled it across all accounts. So what do? Now? Well, I have a broad campaign, which is doing my prospecting and my remarketing, okay? So the way that's set up is you have the campaign, it will have one ad set inside of it, and in that ad set, you will have your open targeting. So there's no interest or anything. I've just got my age, my location, and my gender. And then within that, I will exclude purchasers always, and I will exclude leads. And then in some clients' accounts, I will exclude the add to cart as well, okay? But not every account, and I'll explain why in a minute. And that will basically be your campaign. So it's targeting new people and it is also targeting remarketing. And then what I do in some clients is I'll have another campaign, and these are the clients where I've excluded the add to cart. I'll have another campaign that is targeting add to cart, but it's a catalog campaign, okay? So it's a catalog of all the products. So it has a very, very specific function, and the messaging in that campaign specifically talks about cart abandonment. So that's why I have it separate, because we're talking about cart abandonment. We have all the different products, so they have to have seen a product for the catalog to find the right people. So I don't want that in the main campaign, because if you've never seen the business before, or if you've never added anything to cart, you don't want to see messaging that says added to cart. So there's just low spend on that, and yeah, fits a particular function. But generally I will have them open with no exclusion of add to cart, and it would just be campaign, broad audience, with the exclusion of purchase and the exclusion of leads. And then the reason why I'm excluding the leads is because these days, the fact that the third-party data isn't as good, it is just better, I think, to remarket to your current customers with the free channels like email, like SMS, okay? So some clients still want to target their purchasers, but I find most don't. They're happy that they're carrying that on their free channels, and we're sticking to Facebook as a prospecting tool. Now, there's three main things I like about setting up my campaigns this way. The first one is Facebook gets to do all its learning in the one place. So it's easier for you to exit the learning phase. You're not spreading your budget out thin. And then within that as well, Facebook gets to decide where it distributes your budget. So it decides, okay, am I going to turn up the remarketing? I'm going to turn down the remarketing and turn up the prospecting because we need new people in the funnel. By giving Facebook that flexibility, it just gives you more stable performance because it can automatically decide when it pulls the levers up and down. And the second reason connected to that is, for me as a media buyer, that then makes it way easier for me to manage. I'm no longer having to go into all these different ad sets and try and pull the budget levers up and down, pull the creative levers up and down, whilst trying to maintain that overall ROAS performance. I now just let Facebook do it, and I tweak it at a much higher level. Okay, so I'm still tweaking the budget, I'm tweaking the creative to keep that overall performance, but I don't have to be so macro going in and doing every little thing, which is really, really hard to maintain overall performance when you're tweaking little things. Okay, so that has made my life as a media buyer much easier, but has also, you know, as a result, made the accounts more stable because you're not relying on a human doing it, you're allowing the machine to do it. And finally, bottom line, it saves a lot of money and it saves a lot of time because you're not doing creative testing for prospecting, creative testing for middle of funnel, creative testing for bottom of funnel, and trying to have all those learnings at each level, losing money trying to do that, and also the time invested in building all those assets. You now just have the one campaign, like I said, and you're doing one type of asset for everything, so you don't have to build as much, and you also don't need to spend as much because it's covering all bases. So 3 great reasons there, really. And one last thing before we end the video, as I know someone might ask it in the comments. Let's say you were doing your segmented campaigns because you like to have the ability to control Facebook going out and getting new prospects. You know, you want to keep your reach high, and maybe in the past you've had it combined, and yeah, that Facebook just over time starts to look at spending more of your budget in the remarketing levels and not going and prospecting new people. You start to see your reach decreasing. Sure, that can happen. The way to counteract that really is to be cycling in new creatives so that Facebook goes out and gets more people to show these creatives to do. That's really going to come down to creative fatigue, and you can see it happening by monitoring your frequency and monitoring your first time impression ratio. The way you find your first time impression ratio is to go onto the right hand side, and on the bottom you'll see a magnifying glass with strokes in it, I think. And when you hover over it, you have to be the ad set level. It will say inspect, okay? And you can go in there, see your first time impression ratio, which is essentially the percentage of people who are seeing your, who are getting impressions for the first time, okay? So if that is trending downwards, you're starting to just show your ads to remarketing. And if you tried cycling in creatives and it's not fixing it, sure, at that point, maybe it's time to then just duplicate the campaign so that Facebook gets to restart that learning and goes back out and sees other people. But I've not found that to be too much of an issue. You know, just keeping the campaign learnings, cycling in different creatives has generally been fine up to this point. So that's the end of the video, guys. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed it and you want to see more videos, please do give it a subscribe, and there'll be more content of this nature. And then also, if you decide to go and try consolidating your campaigns and, you know, getting rid of remarketing, having it all in the one campaign, leave a comment if you've had positive or negative feedback. I'd love to hear it, or I'd love to give you some tips if there is anything that you maybe been struggling with. Okay, so until the next video, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you all very soon.